You are listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. I'm Kyle Bryan.
And I'm Sean Baumstark. Together, we're navigating life with disability.
Sean and I were both diagnosed with a rare, debilitating, life-shortening disease that has affected our physical abilities and causes us to live with urgency. We are constantly looking for the next challenge, not only in spite of our disease, but because of it.
We are two dudes who constantly challenge our own abilities, and we invite you to do the same.
Hello, world. Thank you for joining us here on the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This is episode 003. It is actually, if you're counting, it's our fourth episode, but we're calling it 003 because we called our first one 000. Hey, Sean, how's it going?
What's going on, Kyle? It's about time we get back at this.
I know. How was your holidays?
Holiday season was great. Had a lot of fun. I'm glad they're behind us. And actually, I think you and probably most of the world would be proud. I've already taken down all my Christmas decorations. And
wow, man, that's quite a step. Yeah, congratulations.
If you know me or you've been around or Periscope or whatever, you know that I tend to leave a couple things up till like June or July. Not this year.
Nice. That's encouraging for all of us slackers. You know, even a slacker like you can get it done every once in a while.
You just put your head to it and go for it. What about you? I know you were on the road quite a bit. You came home and visited family. How were the holidays for you?
Yeah, the holidays were really awesome. I got to hang out with my niece and nephew, which is always really fun. And, you know, I don't get to see them all the time. So, you know, to see snapshots of them growing up is really exciting. And that was a lot of fun. Me and you hung out.
That's right, we did.
About a little over a week ago.
Yeah.
That was fun because we usually get to hang out just on Skype here.
Right.
And so, you know, it was fun to hang out in person. I got to see your apartment, your studio.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool. I enjoyed that. You know, it's not very often that you and I get to spend half a day together, much less, you know, just kind of no agenda, kind of do what we want however time goes. So that was nice. Yeah,
that was good. And then I went to dinner. You dropped me off. I went to dinner with my buddies from high school. There were 6 of us, all dudes that hung out in high school, and we haven't all been together for like 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And so that was really fun. Just like laughing all night, like stomach hurting, laughing, you know, abs hurting, laughing because it's just exhausting. So that was a lot of fun. And I spent New Year's with them too. So it was pretty incredible.
That's cool.
And then I visited Southern California. We're going to do a ride down in Southern California, in March 4th.
That's right.
So that was cool. And so yeah, it was good for me.
Nice. Glad to hear it.
I want to jump right into this, Sean, because I'm pretty excited about this topic. I spend a lot of my time on the road and you know, traveling. So the topic is travel and mobility and why that's important and how we get it done and you know, travel is freedom.
Yeah.
And disability, on the surface, disability seems to limit that freedom. But really, it just depends on how you look at it and how you get it done. And so I think what we want to talk about is how we get it done, partly, the nuts and bolts of going through the process, but also kind of the mentality it takes to keep a cool head and realize that, the purpose of travel is to get to the destination. And sometimes it really is the destination that counts more than the journey.
Sure.
Obviously, there are exceptions to that rule. But, I think that's the way I think a lot of times when I'm traveling is, all right, I just got to get through this to get to my destination and do what I need to do. And you know what? I think that most other people are in that mentality too when they're traveling. And so I think when we realize that, like, we're all in the same boat, no one's against us. And we just gotta kind of figure it out as we go.
True. I think it's perfect timing too. I mean, we talked about traveling for the holidays, and of course they're right behind us, but I'm sure a lot of our listeners were traveling a little bit as well. It tends to be the most popular time of year to travel. So, and knowing a lot of our listeners are dealing with disability themselves, I think we're going to have, hopefully, cross my fingers, that we get some good feedback and maybe some other people can share their tips with you and I. That'll make traveling a little more fun or easier or whatever it can be for us. So, no, you're right. I think overall, when you start thinking about travel, whether you're a perfectly able-bodied person or not, there are things about travel that aren't luxurious. They're annoying. They're frustrating. Whether it's waiting in line to get through the metal detector, or having to take everything off if you're not TSA pre-check in order to go through the metal detector, or whether it's having to waste an hour and a half at the airport because you want to be early, whatever it, like obviously,
or, you know what? Think about timing. Like, oh my gosh, like I missed a flight last week and it was so annoying. Oh my gosh. Luckily, I had enough time to get on the next flight to get to where I was supposed to go, but that's always, like, just think about that. Like, the clock is ticking all the time when you're traveling. Like, I have to get to my flight, or I have to get to my meeting, or whatever, you know?
No,
So, sorry, I interrupted your
that's
thought
fine.
there.
Speaking of those, what do you call those? Not flight changes, but layovers. Thank you. There it is. I found it. I learned a long time ago, and by long time ago, I mean like 2 years ago. If I have to travel far and I'm going to do a layover, I'll allow as much time as possible between layovers, or between, landing and catching the next flight. Number one, you and I both know I can't run. There is no such thing as in a hurry for us.
Especially when you're, like, carrying a bag or something, right?
And it just adds to the stress. So, last year I did a few long trips, and yes, I wasted a lot of time in airports waiting, but I didn't stress out. I didn't get frustrated. I didn't panic. So, after last year's experiences, I realized that's kind of the way to travel for me. Keep the blood pressure low. Everybody knows I get high blood pressure. I run out of patience, have a short fuse.
Really? I didn't realize that.
Anyway.
I agree. And, last week was a perfect example. I'm, like, in the moment. Like, literally, I got to my gate 5 minutes before the plane was supposed to leave. So it was like a 9 o'clock flight. I got there at 8:54, actually. Jeez. And the doors were already closed, and they wouldn't allow me to get on the plane because apparently the doors closed 10 minutes before the flight leaves. Like, why don't you say the flight leaves at 8:50 then?
Yeah.
Like, come on, that's just ridiculous. Like, it doesn't make sense. So anyway, but that was a time when literally in the moment, I was like, all right, just stay calm. Like, it's fine. It's not a big deal. It's so like life is just crumbling at that moment, you know? And you just have to like
Totally.
keep your head and realize like, okay, I missed the fight. It's actually not that big a deal. And I think that relates to a lot of situations when traveling. Like my story a couple weeks ago, you know, the guy freaking leaves me on the side of the road, you know, with my wheelchair taken apart and drives away. And I just go, all right, like this isn't the worst thing that ever happened to somebody.
Sure.
I'll figure it out and get back on track. So, so, you know, in travel, there are many different modes, right? And the main two I think that we probably use are a car and a plane. Is that, I mean, you know, there's boats and trains and stuff.
You know, for me personally, I do most of my travel via train and airplane. I really do.
Really?
I mean, around town, I drive a car, but if I'm leaving town, whether it's going to Southern California to see family, that's 100% train. Going to Southern California for a drug trial or maybe visiting Colorado or Florida, that's always a flight. But my two modes are train and plane.
Wait, there's a train that goes from, like, can you get on it in Sacramento and go to Bakersfield?
Yeah, directly. Like, obviously,
Oh my
it stops
gosh.
along the way to pick up other passengers or drop people off. But yeah, that's my preferred means of getting to see family in Bakersfield.
Maybe that's kind of lame that I didn't know that.
Oh, that's fine.
I
In fact,
probably should.
Let me educate you and everybody else here real quick. The train from Sacramento to Bakersfield typically takes about 5 hours and 20 minutes, which is about the same time it would take in driving. Driving, you can
Right.
probably do it in 5 hours. But in a train, I spend $38, which I wouldn't.
Oh my
a tank
gosh.
of gas is more than that. Or getting to Bakersfield in a car takes more than a tank of gas. Then I have to pay attention to the road if I'm driving. If I want to go to the restroom or pull over and get a snack, that adds time. Well, on the train, I don't have to worry about that. Somebody else conducts the train, and if I gotta get up and go to the bathroom, we don't have to stop and pull over. I can just walk around, I can read, I can sleep. I don't have to worry about what's going on around me. So that by itself is incredibly relaxing. Thus, I love the train.
And, like, it gives you time to play Angry Birds and Fruit Ninja and stuff, you know?
I've been playing 8-ball pool. I've been playing checkers through iMessage, and yeah, I think it's great. Now, I will tell you, traveling via train does not come without its complications. Like, there are plenty, and maybe we'll get into that in a little bit. But for the most part, it's easy.
Tell me right now, because I feel like train is the most uncomplicated way to travel, right?
Well,
what are the complications?
no, you're right. I've had some complications, I think, given my disability and the perception, if you just take a quick glance at me, that I'm not disabled and or I'm a punk who's trying to work the system. You know, I often get on the train with the hat and, sweatpants, and I probably just look like I'm a little bit younger than I really am. I don't know. But I've had some run-ins where the ticket agents or conductors are like, oh, you can't sit down here with the disabled, sorry, back up. The train it's double-decker, so upstairs is your general seating. Downstairs is reserved for folks with disabilities or who otherwise have a difficult time managing stairs. Well, whether I'm disabled or not, I actually fall into that category. So, at
Right,
first
'cause
glance,
whether it's due to a disability or not, you have a hard time with stairs.
yeah. Given the history and not really knowing how to go about the way Amtrak does their disabled ticketing or disabled passengers ticketing, I've had a couple incidences where they get argumentative and try to make me go up the stairs and manage that challenge, even though they shouldn't.
Right. Yeah. This relates to a lot of different situations, but I think I know where you are at because I was there at one point. Like, I didn't use a wheelchair, but I was still really unsteady, right?
Sure.
And so I know what you're talking about, but I think for me right now, sometimes those situations are a whole lot easier because I'm in a wheelchair, and it's easy to see that I have a disability and that, people need to pay attention to, and we need to figure out what to do about it, right?
Sure.
And, invisible disabilities are really difficult to kind of manage those situations.
Yes, you do make a good point, though. Generally speaking, outside of that perception, train is super easy. You can do it all on your phone. You can walk right onto the train. You don't even have to deal with anybody before you sit down. And then it's not even until you're moving that somebody comes by to verify that you paid to be on that train. So, generally speaking, super, super easy.
Yeah. So for trains, I'll interject here for somebody in a wheelchair who actually does need help, because there's a little bit of a ramp they use to get onto the train so they don't fall down the tracks. But so I always go into the station. You have to look on the station map or on the website and figure out which stations do and don't allow wheelchair access. Sure. Some have a raised platform, some don't. And so you got to figure that out. And then I always go into the station, like when I'm going from Wilmington, Delaware down to Washington, D.C., I always go into the station and ask for a red cap. On the Amtrak, they're all called red caps because, why? Because they wear red caps.
Like the conductors or you? Like you have to wear a red hat to tell the world you're disabled.
No. The people who help with like luggage and, mainly it's for people with mobility issues. And people also, I think, people that just want help carrying their luggage down to their train. But I'll always go and check in with the red cap and tell him what train I'm on. And he'll keep an eye on the time. And then when it's time, he'll be like, all right, let's go. Nice. And he'll put my luggage on a little cart and bring it down and grab the ramp and get me in. And, I'm always the first on the train, which is kind of awesome. Sure. I can sit wherever I want. And, so anyway, that's how it works for me. So there is a little interaction prior to getting on for me. Sure. But it usually works out pretty well. I do really like traveling by train. So I wanted to one of the questions that I get a lot, or I've had this question in my mind when I started using a wheelchair, and I asked it to my friend Dinah, and she actually wrote a blog post a long time ago about how to travel by plane using a wheelchair, and her post was the purpose of her post was to answer my questions. So, nice. So that was kind of cool, but people, they're like, how do you even get through the airport and get on the plane when you're using a wheelchair? Mm-hmm. And so I guess I just kind of wanted to walk through that a little bit. And so all right, I get to the port, and I go in the doors, and I go up to the counter if I have bags to check. And say I fly Southwest a whole lot, so we'll use that example. And go and check my bags in, and obviously they see I'm in a wheelchair, so they give me a pre-board thing and boarding pass. And at Southwest, they do an inspection tag for the wheelchair. So they walk around my chair and they inspect it and see if there's like a whole bunch of damage, so that they can record that. And I can't say after the flight, like, hey, you damaged my chair.
Sure.
Like, they have a record of it, right?
Yeah.
So they do the inspection tag and give me all my stuff. Then I head to TSA. And when I approach TSA in different airports, they do it a little bit differently, obviously. But I always look for the wheelchair lane. And if I can't find it, especially if there's a ton of people in line, because this will save you like an hour sometime,
Sure.
maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. But if I can't see the wheelchair lane, if I can't find it, I always ask somebody, hey, do you have a wheelchair lane? In most, actually, I don't know if it's a requirement, but pretty much every time they have a lane, they're like, oh yeah, it's right here, and they show me where it is. I bypass everyone, and for those able-bodied people that are in that line, like I apologize, but I'm not really sorry actually, because it's one of the perks. I have a friend that says he has a shirt that says, "I'm just in it for the parking," and obviously that's kind of funny. But hey, sometimes it's true. It's nice to be able to park close and bypass the line.
Although, I will say, when it comes to those folks, me, who have to stand in line, I look at people like you in a chair, and I'm like, dude, why not? Like, why wouldn't you just wait? You already have a seat. Like, you're already more comfortable than I am.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, it's the rules, man. You got to play by the rules.
I hear you.
So, well, all right. So then check this out. Every time I go through, because I don't have pre-check, which is stupid.
Why?
I need to get pre-check.
Yeah, I'm actually shocked, especially because. Sorry, side note. I heard what it costs to go. You can actually buy that and go through the program or whatever. And Kyle,
how much?
I'm quite surprised.
How much does it cost?
Well, I've only heard this through one person, so granted, I guess she could have been lying. But I saw her right after she'd done it, because the TSA office apparently for our area is close to one of our retail stores. So she was shopping afterwards. I'm like, hey, how you been? Blah, blah, blah. We were talking, and she was like, yeah, I was over in the neighborhood getting my TSA pre-check certification, $85 for 5 years.
Wow.
So, yeah, and that's for you, it's like $1 a flight,
Yeah, I've had pre-check a couple times just randomly, and it's super awesome. I just haven't gone in to do it. It's so stupid. Anyway,
how many flights were you on this week? Just last week alone. Didn't you take how many flights?
I think 4. So yeah, just last week.
That's crazy.
And so the reason it's so lame that I don't get that is because I have to get a full pat down every single time I go through TSA. And I mean, I guess I'm not gonna pretend that I don't enjoy a stranger like touching me. Oh my gosh, my favorite line is, all right, I'm going to move my hand up your inner thigh until I meet resistance. Like, or until I meet your torso. Like, all right.
Have a good time.
What's right there at the torso? Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, yeah, I'll get, if if I don't have pre-check next time we hang out, like, you can feel free to, like, punch me in the nose.
This is terrible.
So, first of all, I get in line and I put my stuff through the thing, and then I have to wait. And they yell,
Wait.
the guy at the...
Sorry, back up a little bit. You get in line, or maybe I'm ahead of you.
After the guy checks my boarding pass, then I get in line, like, at the actual conveyor belt thing. So, like, where you, like, take your shoes off and belt and all that.
Sure.
So I take my shoes off, take my belt off, take my laptop out of the case, you know.
You wouldn't have to
Put
do
it in a
any of
separate
this
bin,
with TSA pre-check.
Yeah, you don't have to, yeah.
I just wanted to say that out loud.
Thanks, man. Thanks for rubbing it in. So I do all that, and then I step aside, and I have to wait for someone to come and do the pat down. So that the guy at the little metal detector, he yells over his shoulder, male assist on 3. Male assist on 3. And, like, you just have to cross your fingers, first of all, that someone even hears them.
Oh, sure.
And then second of all, that, like, someone's available to come over. And sometimes, like, literally the reason I missed my flight the other day was because I sat waiting for someone to come do the pat down for like 20 minutes.
Holy cow.
If I had pre-check, I wouldn't have missed my flight.
No, I'm glad you recognize that.
So then I get the pat down, and I told you the about the pat down, you know, till I meet resistance. It's in my nightmares sometimes. And so I finally get through after however much time they care to take. I get through the screening. I go to my gate, and I have to check in at the counter because on Southwest they have one more, the destination tag, they call it. It's like a bag tag, pretty much. The same tag they put on your suitcase, they have to put on my chair. Huh. So they put that, and they also put a little claim at gate tag on my chair.
Sure.
So those are all the tags I need, and then I'm ready to go. And then for Southwest, well, for most airlines, it's important to show up a half an hour early. For me,
At the gate.
At the gate,
Yep.
At least half an hour early. Just to let them know I'm there. On Southwest, it's open seating, and pre-boards, you know, go before everyone, right? And I can sit in any seat I want on the plane. And usually they reserve the first row, but I don't really like using the first row because you have to put your stuff up in the bin.
Yeah.
You know, and so I usually here's a tip. If you get on first, take the fourth row on the left on the window. And I've tested this so many times, and my theory is that if there's any seat open in a plane, if there's only one seat open, it's going to be the middle seat on the left side on the fourth row. So,
how in the world have you come to this conclusion?
I just, you know, it's just a theory I've tested over time, and it's every time it's disproved, I forget about it. Every time it's proven, I
you make a mental note.
Yeah. So anyway, the aisle chair for me, the aisle chair is another thing. Sometimes I use the aisle chair. Sometimes I just kind of pull myself up and grab onto the seats and walk back to my seat. And the reason I don't always... So the aisle chair is a chair that I can transfer into. The airline has it at like every gate.
Yeah.
And I transfer into it, and it fits down the aisle of the airplane. So they can take me back. Like, if I fly some other airline, like United or American or something, they have assigned seating. So sometimes I'm at seat like 23B or something, and so sometimes I feel like it's easier to use the aisle chair to get on the plane.
Sure.
However, it all depends on how fast they get there on the other side, getting me off the plane. And so that's why sometimes I don't use the aisle chair, because a lot of times they're not very fast. I'll sit on a plane for 15 minutes and wait for them to bring the aisle chair so I can get off the plane. And you know, when you have a tight layover, as you were mentioning before, you know, sometimes we don't have 5 minutes,
Sure.
and that can jeopardize missing our next flight. So sometimes I use the aisle chair and sometimes I don't, depending on the situation. I had a few thoughts. I was traveling last week, and I had a few thoughts about asking for help in while traveling. And really, this relates to asking for help in all situations. But I kind of really solidified a couple thoughts on this, and really these are just thoughts. And there's 100 different ways to think about these things. But so asking for help is really valuable, I think. But at the same time, so here's what I wrote. I have 2 lists. One of them is all the things I can do. The other list is all the things I can't do. For me, with FA, with a progressive disease, one of these lists is always getting shorter, and one of these lists is always getting longer, and there's nothing I can do about it. And I think it's probably natural to resist that, right? When someone offers help, it can feel like they're offering to take one of the things off the things that I can do and chalk it up on the list of things I can't do.
Sure.
And it's probably natural to resist that. So I want to be able to continue to do things like pushing myself up the little hill at the airport or lifting my chair in my van. These things may seem small, but they're absolutely critical to maintaining my independence. If I can't do one of those things, I don't travel at all.
Sure.
And my freedom is limited, right? Mm-hmm. And so if I don't do those things, then I chalk them up on the list of things I can't do. So here we go. I'm reading this because I wrote it down so I didn't forget. So when the time comes that I can't do these things anymore, I'll be okay with that. And I'll be okay with allowing somebody else to do it for me. But until then, I'm not going to apologize for resisting help. And so I think that's a thought that able-bodied people that just want to help don't have. Like
Sure.
that, you know what I mean? And hopefully it's a fairly logical thought for somebody in my situation or for somebody with a disability. But it's just something that people don't think about unless you're in the situation. And my next thought is that I can't blame people for not understanding that. And, I can't get frustrated with other people for the frustration that I feel that there's no reason they should feel that frustration,
Sure.
And I caught myself the other day on the airplane getting off. There's people that just want help and they're offering all this stuff and I'm refusing. And I found myself getting frustrated. And then afterwards I was like, why am I getting frustrated? Like, these people are so nice. All they want to do is help. They're not thinking about these thoughts that I just talked about right now. And so I think it's just important to keep that in mind in situations where we get frustrated. Like, no one's trying to be a jerk.
Sure.
Everyone's just trying to either make it through the day or do what their boss told them or follow the rules or whatever, right?
Sure.
And you know, we all approach things from our own perspective. And I think it's really important to think about things from other people's perspective as well, especially in situations where people are just trying to be nice and help out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, those are really good points, especially when you know for the most part, generally speaking, people just want to help. And I'm in the same mindset as you. I'll refuse it quite often. Not because I don't want to give them the opportunity to give me something, but because I want to do it myself. I think you make a good point to realize that those folks, they're not considering what that means to you internally. And that's fine. That's not their fault. You can't blame them for that. You just have to graciously say no thank you, or decide to take advantage of the assistance they're offering you.
yeah, I agree, and just keep note of, there's many people with many different perspectives in like every situation. So I wanted to talk about another thing. I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit, but one of the things, I used to rent cars a lot, and we kind of talked about Uber the other last episode or one before that or something. Sure. But Uber has really changed. I really don't rent cars anymore that much. I either get an Uber, or I ask someone to take me somewhere, which, is not always convenient for either party,
Sure.
But, that's how it works.
4 a.m.
Because
airport run.
Yeah, exactly. Like, hey, yeah.
Hey, what are we doing tomorrow at 4 a.m.? What do you think I'm doing tomorrow at 4 a.m.?
Yeah, exactly. So I drive at home. I drive with hand controls. And I made that transition a few years ago. I think 2.5 years ago or something like that. So I drive with hand controls. And as you can imagine, hand controls are not all that common. Like, cars don't just come off the line with hand controls installed. And so my first thought when considering switching to hand controls in my car was like, how am I ever going to rent a car ever again? And it kind of freaked me out because it seemed like it was threatening to limit my mobility and limit my freedom. But come to find out that every single rental car company has hand controls that they can, like, they have a few cars in their fleet that have hand controls, and if you call them 2 days in advance, for most companies, they'll be able to do hand controls for you. Now, this is not something that is super common. So a lot of people, like, I'll get on the phone with the rental car company and be like, hey, I need hand controls in my car. They're like, what? What is that?
Yeah, I'm like, you just push the button for the volume to go up and down. They're all hand controls.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't drive with my feet, so I need a device where I can control the speed of the car with my hands. And they're like, oh,
hand controls.
I didn't even know it. Like, I swear, maybe this is untrue, but maybe I was just reading it from the tone of the person on the other end of the phone, but it sounded like they said, I don't even know what that is. What are you even talking about? I didn't know you could do that. But anyway, so I finally get to the right person, and they're like, yeah, we'll have them ready for you. Well, that doesn't always happen.
Sure.
Because people don't know what it is. They don't know how to mark it on the reservation. You know, things get lost in the shuffle, whatever. So you have to be patient. Most of the time, it's pretty good. But sometimes, like one time, I showed up at Denver Airport and there was no spinner knob on the steering wheel, and you know, I do gas and brake with my left hand, and so I only have one hand to turn the wheel. Like, if I'm in a parking lot, I need to be able to turn the wheel all the way around, right? Sure. And so there was no spinner knob, and you can't really steer very effectively with one hand. I mean, you can do it, right?
Sure.
But I'm used to having spinner knob, so. And I didn't feel comfortable not having one.
Too.
Yeah, so I'm like, I need a spinner knob, and they're like they looked at me like, why are you requesting these crazy things? I'm like, I can't drive without it.
Yeah,
like, and I think it was a Saturday, so they were worried because they might not have had somebody on site like that's certified to install those things. I'm like, dude, just give it to me. I'll put it on right now. Like, it's not a big deal. But they ended up having the guy there, and he put it on.
Oh.
And it was fine. But you know, there's just little stuff like that all the time that kind of, you just gotta kind of roll with it. So that is my story on hand controls.
Well, I think you're actually making a good point there, whether it's hand controls or disability or not. It's always good to help alleviate the stress of travel, because I think overall, let's face it, no matter what you're doing or where you're going or why you're going there, there's an automatic level of stress, whether you're driving, training, flying, running, whatever it is. There's some stress, and I think you make a good point. To always double check. You know, yeah, you said to be patient, but I think there's some what's the word I'm looking for? There's some validity in making a reservation and asking for hand controls, and then maybe calling back the next day or a few hours later to make sure that everything is set. That's a lesson I learned actually a couple months ago from somebody I work for who's not disabled whatsoever. But I was on a trip and somebody booked my hotel for me. Turns out they booked the wrong hotel, so I get to the hotel. They don't have a room for me. And not only that, they don't have any rooms available. So it's 9 o'clock at night. I'm frustrated, and now I got to figure something else out. And I don't know if you've ever tried to get a decent hotel in Los Angeles, but they're not easy to come by at 9 p.m. Anyway, I was talking to my boss, and he explained, when him and his wife travel, no matter what it's for, work or pleasure, he always calls again. He books the room, whether it's online or over the phone, and he calls and just to make sure it's set up. And that was a lesson I learned, and I think you're making a similar point, even though you may not be intending to always follow up on that. Do they have an aisle chair? Do they have hand controls? And is your reservation set up and ready for you come the time you get there? Now I feel like I'm rambling, but essentially that's what I started doing a couple months ago. Is I'll book my travel and then I'll go back to it to verify in a day or two or whatever my options are. I think that's something. Sorry, that's a good thing for people to do, whether they're disabled, they're perfectly able-bodied, just to make sure that the stress of travel is minimized a bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in all situations that is very important. But especially when I've had so many friends, and I myself have had trouble with like being like, hey, making a hotel reservation and being like, I need a wheelchair accessible room. And then you get there and there's no wheelchair accessible rooms. And I did this in Palm Springs one time, Palm Springs, California. And actually somebody else made the reservation for me and I hadn't got there yet. So they checked in and the person said, oh, that option is not available right now. We're like, what? No, we made this reservation 6 months ago, and it's not an option. It's what we need.
It's not something you just turn off.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, oh, okay, I'll just leave my wheelchair outside the door and walk in. What do you even... That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So... Yeah, it is important, I think, to double check and triple check and, not be rude about it, but, cover your bases.
Totally. And I know, like, for me, I've never done that until recently because it's just more work. I got to look up the hotel's phone number. I got to call. If it's a big chain, you got to wait on hold because... You can't call the front desk direct. It's some 1-800 number. And anyway, yeah, it does take work. But at the end of the day, if it makes check-in or boarding easier when the time comes, then I've learned that that's more valuable than wasting or than the expense of 5 or 10 minutes to follow up on all those little details.
Oh, I totally agree. Well, yeah, and, that 10-minute phone call could be the difference between not being able to get in your room, being able to get in your room or not, part
of the reason why we wanted to talk about travel and mobility really is to help encourage people that, have this anxiety because of the difficulties and the challenges that travel presents given a disability. And I think it's true. Like, there's always going to be some element of a struggle and a hardship. But overall, like you said in the beginning, Kyle, travel is freedom. And I would encourage our listeners, friends, family, if you have the opportunity to travel, or to go somewhere, do something exciting, or be a part of something that's important to you, man, I would encourage you not to say no or not to skip out on it simply because you have an anxiety or there's a concern of travel. Now, maybe I shouldn't say it that way because anxieties can be really crippling for some, but I would hope and encourage people
too,
that...
Like,
say again?
And anxiety is real, too.
Yeah,
it's not just
absolutely.
like something that we can discount.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And I know you didn't mean to do that, but I just wanted to point out that that's a real thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, not what I meant, not how I meant to say it, but overall, I'm afraid that some people don't even try it simply because of a certain level of fear. And hopefully, you do a little bit here and do a little bit there, and you realize that hopefully, as long as everything goes fine, that it's really not that bad. In fact, Kyle, you and I have a mutual friend or another member in the FA community. She actually posted on Facebook not too long ago. She took her first flight, I think, or it was her first flight by herself. I don't remember. And she was glad she did it, and it was fine, and everything worked out. But I also know that things go wrong, so that's not true for everybody. But overall, I think you made a good point, Kyle. Nobody in the industry, TSA or flight attendants or train conductors or Uber drivers, really set out to be challenging or jerks, or they're just doing their job. If I could give any tips to individuals who struggle or have challenges when it comes to travel or physical mobility, there are a couple things I would encourage folks to do. And Kyle, maybe you can throw out some of your tips, and hopefully that could be the point of today's recording. Two of the big things I've learned, in fact, I already mentioned one, is to allow yourself all the time you think you're gonna need. Don't be so worried about saving time because you don't want a long layover. Well, again, anxiety is real, and for people like you and I, we can't run across the terminal. We can't get there fast enough. So I would encourage folks to really allow themselves as much travel time as possible. I learned last year, or I started last year, going to the airport with plenty of time to get through security and to sit down and have coffee or a meal if I need to. I'd much rather waste 30, 45, or an hour and a half on the other side of security and know that there's nothing between me and my gate than to be in a panic in line at security begging people to let me cut them off. Like, to me, that just does not make sense. And when people do that to me, I look at them like, no, you should have gotten here earlier. So give yourself plenty of time would be one of my tips. And then secondly, Kyle, I think I may have told you this not too long ago. The more bags I have to worry about, the more stressful it is. So I love Southwest because my bags fly free. But if I'm not on an airline, I do what I can. I'll just pay for it. I'll find a way to make it work because I can't lug 2 or 3 bags through the terminal. And typically, I'll only go through security with a backpack, something that I don't have to balance necessarily in either arm. Right. It's just essentially balanced on my back, and that's it. I check everything else whenever I can because it's a waste of $25 or whatever, and it sucks. But it makes traveling and mobility so much easier.
Yeah, I even if I don't have that much stuff, sometimes, especially if I have a layover, I'll just check it, even if it'll get in the overhead bin, even if it costs me an extra $25, I'll check it because it's not worth it trying to negotiate that through the airport.
Totally. I used to make fun of these little carry-on suitcases that have the 4 wheels on the bottom that go any which direction. Can you picture them?
Yeah, totally.
Well, I used to see those thinking like, what's the point of that? Those look so silly. Like, I would kind of make fun of them, like, that's just lazy or whatever. And I bought myself one about 2 years ago, and it's the best thing I've ever purchased. I love it. Not only does it make it easy when all 4 wheels move like that, but for me, it's also like a crutch in a way. It's like my cane to get through the terminal. So if it's not a backpack I'm using, it's one of those little guys with the 4 wheels. So for whatever it's worth, Sean Baumstark says use a backpack or a 4-wheel carry-on.
Nice. That's a good takeaway. All right, I have a couple of thoughts to kind of wrap everything up, and they're more or less things we talked about already, but if I was gonna have one takeaway for this episode, it would be to think about everything from other people's perspective. When things get frustrating and it feels like the whole world is conspiring against you, think about it from everyone else's perspective, and remember that everyone there in this situation is just trying to make it through the day. No one's conspiring against you. And I think that, when we keep that in mind and just consider things from everyone else's perspective, I think it makes things a lot smoother. And then my second thought is something I think of a lot. One of my friends, I don't know if he really said this or this was just his attitude. I think he said this, is always go. whenever there's an opportunity to travel, do something new, always go. Obviously, you know, there's a lot more to every situation and you have to consider everything, but I think that's a cool mentality, just as far as trying new things. And you know what? Hey, if it doesn't work out, if it's really terrible, that's fine too. You know, you don't want to do it again. But, you know, like we were saying, travel is freedom, and figuring out how to make it happen is definitely worth it. So
Good points. I like it.
Yeah.
I think that's a great mantra for life. Always go. Always, always move. Put one foot in front of the other and keep rolling is kind of the way I'm hearing that today.
Yep. Good stuff, dude. Well, I really like this episode. It looks like we're a little longer than our previous episodes, but I think it's going to have to be that way because I enjoyed our conversation today. So our listeners are just going to have to deal with it, you know?
Yep. Put it on pause. Come back to it later if you need to. And for the record, I guess my pre-board snafu story, we'll save that for another day because I think that's a good one. But no reason to throw that in for this one. You know,
yeah, maybe that's a teaser for the future. Like, Sean has a good story that he didn't quite get in today, so stay tuned.
Cool. Well, thanks for all the tips and stories today, Kyle. I'm with you. I think this is kind of just a fun recording with a couple of pointers for those who might struggle when it comes to traveling. So, good stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. And so right before we end, I just want to encourage everyone again to go on iTunes and leave a review if you enjoy the show. That is the most valuable thing you could do for us. If you didn't get me a Christmas present, maybe just go on iTunes. Yeah, that's what I want for Christmas. You can give me an early one for Christmas 2017 too.
That would mean a lot for sure. Give us a rating and take a moment to write a sentence or two. That makes all the difference in the world. Also, if you think about it, you got some tips that you can add to the mix of the conversation today. Please leave a comment on the website. You can attach it directly to this post. Any questions, we'd love to answer on future recordings. So be sure to check us out online and give us some input there.
That's all.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right. Have a great day, y'all.
Thanks, Sean. Later. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. To find this episode and links to some of the stuff we talked about today, find us online at twodisableddudes.com. or subscribe on iTunes.
We'd like to hear from you and feature your feedback and questions on future podcasts. Be sure to visit us at twodisableddudes.com to find our contact info and connect on social media.
Special thanks to our audio producer, Jake Tompkins, who also composed the music.
We'll share a new podcast every other week. We hope you'll listen and share it with a friend. Until next time, keep living with urgency.